Hello and welcome to Good Evening Britain, a Force for Good's weekly show coming to you live from our studios here in the heart of the great British city of Glasgow, with me, your host, Alistair McConnachie. We are broadcasting on all our digital platforms throughout the United Kingdom and across the world. We're bringing you quality pro-UK comment and analysis every Wednesday from 7 until 8 p.m. on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, and on TikTok. Folks, please do send in your greetings. Tell us where in this fantastic world you are watching from. Send in your comments and send in your questions because we love to hear from you. Now, we've got a packed show. As always, at the bottom of the hour, we've got a guest coming in. It is the American historian and writer and singer, Avellina Balestri, who will be speaking about her specialist subject, which is always fascinating, which is about the British during the American War of Separation, or as they like to call it, the American Revolution. So we'll be speaking with Avellina at the bottom of the hour. That's at 7:30, and she'll be coming on for 25 minutes. Looking forward to that. Please do stick around for that. We've also got our competition, which will be coming after our segment on this day in British history, where we always ask you a question about on this day in British history, and the winner will be able to win these two little badges. This is a little button badge, and this is a little square badge, and they've both got one thing in common. They're both Union Jacks, obviously, which we love the design of here so much in our studio, as you no doubt are well aware. And to answer our question, all you need to do is to send your answer to contact@aforceforgood.uk. That's our email, contact@aforceforgood.uk. And the first person with the correct answer will win those two badges. And if you've never entered before, you've got a good chance of winning. You definitely do have a good chance of winning. So folks, what's on your mind these days? I can tell you what's on our mind at the moment. At the bottom of the hour, we are going to be launching our 7th annual Yule Britannia Christmas Crowdfunder. And it is our annual Yule Britannia Christmas Crowdfunder, which we have at this time of the year, every year, which brings in a little bit of money, which takes us through usually the first 6 months of the year. And in previous years, we had 1 year when it took us through the entire year. But it is a major fundraising moment in unionism every year. The AFFG's Yule Britannia Christmas Crowdfunder, and that's the address. It's not live yet. It won't be live until 7:30, but that's what it will be. It will be crowdfunder.co.uk/AFFG 2025. And we're calling it Help the Union Thrive in 2025. Help the Union thrive in 2025 by donating to our Yule Britannia Christmas Crowdfunder. And I know some people, they save up their pennies, and at this time of the year, that's when they make the donation. At the time of giving, that's when they make the donation to A Force for Good. And we are so grateful. We are so grateful for everybody who donates to us. And we're so blessed, really, to have many supporters who have given every year. And we don't mind how small or large your donation is, it's appreciated, and it goes towards the good fight. And you know that we don't raise a whole lot of money when you compare us to other groups. What did we raise last year? It was just under 3,000, I think it was, which is significantly different from the sorts of things that political parties raise. For example, I cut this out the National the other day. SNP receive more than 680,000 in donations from 3 individuals. This is the National, which I read so that you don't have to. On the 6th of December, 2024. And this 680,000 came in the 3rd quarter of 2024 for the SNP. So that's July, August, and September. In July, August, and September, the SNP received over 680,000 in donations from just 3 individuals. So, folks, don't think for a moment that the SNP have gone away. The SNP has not gone away. The SNP is thriving. It's thriving as far as money is concerned. And it occurred to me, it's always going to have money, because people are always, their cause is such that people can believe in it strongly. For example, it says here, 3 individuals donated more than 200,000 each to the SNP. South African-born Estelle Brownrigg left a lump sum to the party after passing away at the age of 73, and is recorded as donating over 203,000. So that's somebody who died and who thought, you know what I'm going to do with my estate? I'm going to leave it to the SNP. And that might strike you and I as kind of bizarre, really, but the SNP are well placed to pick up those sorts of donations, because nobody dies and leaves money to the Liberal Democrats, for example. Nobody dies and leaves money to the Labour Party. Maybe in the old days they might have, but these days nobody's leaving money to the Labour Party in their will. Surely. I doubt that many people are leaving money to the Conservative Party, unless, for example, they maybe died at age 105 and they wrote their will, 60 years ago, and they forgot to update it or something like that. That's the only kind of person that's leaving money to the Tories these days. You might get some kind of strange rich hippie who'll leave some money to the Greens, but they're going to be pretty few and far between. But the SNP, who can talk about Scotland, people will die and go, yeah, my last wish is to leave my entire wealth to John Swinney. Forget my children. I'll leave it to the SNP, And so the SNP are uniquely placed to pick up those kind of legacies. All right. And they're always going to be uniquely placed to pick up that legacy, the patriotic legacy, as it were. And in that case, it's big money. I mean, 200,000, that would last AFFG for the next, 20 years easily. So, we do get by on very little each year, and we're always very open about our company. Anybody who wants to know how much has come into the party and how much has gone out just needs to look at our returns on Company House, and it's fairly modest it's very modest as far as action groups such as ours is concerned. Anyway, the occasion of our Yule Britannia Christmas Crowdfunder, which comes around once a year, will be starting at in 20 minutes at 7:30 at that address, crowdfunder.co.uk/AFFG 2025. Who are the other people who gave money here to the SNP? Property tycoon Alexander Adam donated 250,000 in August. 250,000. I wonder what he wants in return. A third individual, Thomas McCann, is listed as having donated 228,000, also in August. Goodness sake, that's incredible. Absolutely incredible. So they haven't gone away, folks. If you want to combat financially the SNP, then you can donate to our Christmas crowdfunder, which will be live in 19 minutes. Now let's say hello to some people in the comments. Here's Derek's first in. Good evening, Alistair and AFFG family. 2 weeks today, it's Christmas once again. 2 weeks today. Another year goes by. Derek says the SNP are trying to copy Australia's ban on social media. I haven't been following that one, Derek. That's interesting. Debbie, good evening to you. Been to Perth today. Great stuff. The great British town of Perth. Hi to Kat, who says hello to everyone. Hope you're doing well, Kat. And to Oksana, who says hi all. And to Catherine, hello everyone watching from Steps, the great British village of Steps. Catherine says she doesn't know why she can't watch on Facebook tonight. Well, actually, I can tell you why, because about quarter to 7, Facebook had a little bit of an incident and they seemed to go down. They had an outage kind of worldwide, or at least Britain-wide. A few people were complaining about it. So that's why you weren't able to immediately get onto Facebook. I don't know if it's working now. Hopefully it is. Although well, it might not be, because I noticed this. We've got no comments coming in from Facebook here. Right, we're going live on Facebook now. It just looks like it's still not going to go live on Facebook. So we're on YouTube and on Twitter exclusively at this moment. Right. Hopefully some people will realize that they can go over to YouTube and watch us. Nice to see everybody on TikTok. Send us your questions on TikTok as well. Now, talking about people asking for money, we don't ask the government for money, okay, because we wouldn't get any from the government. But there is a certain group of people who ask the government for money. This group of grifters call for extra cash to look at colonialism in museums. And I cut this out of the Times just at the end of November, there, 29th of November. Money to address the role of slavery and colonialism in Scottish museums could be wasted unless more permanent funding is provided, MSPs have been told. Listen to this. Members of the Empire, Slavery and Scotland's Museums Steering Group, which is otherwise known as a bunch of people who would be completely unemployed were it not for the public sector, spoke to Holyrood's Culture Committee yesterday after the government's support for their recommendation of a dedicated space on Empire, Slavery and Scotland's museums. Don't ask me what a dedicated space is. I just know it's not a good thing. Listen to this. However, they highlighted the fact that only £100,000 had been given to them for the work from ministers, despite their report calling for 5 million in funding. So they called for 5 million in funding. What a bunch of chancers. And they got 100,000, which is still a huge amount of money. And they're still ungrateful. The group, blah, 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 called for looted or unethically acquired items in museum collections to be returned more easily. It reported recommendations on how to handle Scotland's historical ties to empire, colonialism, and slavery. Note how they always chuck in empire and colonialism with slavery as if those two things are the same as slavery, and they're not. They're completely different things. The British Empire exists apart from slavery, which is which was an element in the empire, but it's not the same thing. But they always try to make the two things the same, so that when you think of slavery, you think of empire and you think of colonialism, even though these are three different subjects. We can all agree, for example, that slavery is wrong, but we can't agree that the British Empire was wrong, and we can't necessarily agree that colonialism is always wrong. Jatin Haria, the group's chair, said, quote, "We could waste that 100,000 if we don't continue funding something, because it will just be wasted if whatever we do comes to an end in a year's time. Not just the money, but all of our time and effort would have been totally wasted, and expectations would have been built up." So this person says the word wasted. He gets given, or she gets given, I don't know, Jatin, Jatin, gets given 100,000, but says it's all going to be wasted unless they get more. And this person uses the word waste 3 times in that paragraph. This is like totally just like somebody that, what's the word? No thanks there at all. Ungrateful, completely ungrateful. And then they go on and whinge about some more. Whinging. So they get 100,000, right? And that's from Holyrood. People say to me, last week's program, I talked about how we need to get people into Holyrood who talk about mass immigration. And people said, well, 1 or 2 people said, well, Holyrood doesn't have anything to do with immigration. It can't stop immigration. Well, it can do lots of stuff, and it can certainly fund pro-immigration groups in Scotland, or groups like this one. These decisions, that 100,000, that 100,000 pounds was given to this group on the say-so of the Scottish MSPs. If you can get MSPs into Holyrood who will disapprove of that, who will lobby to get these people unfunded, then that will help. And that's the sort of thing that MSPs can do. They can lobby to get these people unfunded, defunded. They can start that national conversation, because goodness knows we need it. Imagine that. You get given 100,000 and you're not happy because you wanted 5 million. And your complaint is that the 100,000 could be wasted unless you get some more money. The cheek, the absolute cheek. Good. Well, we're looking forward to our guest, who will be coming up at the bottom of the hour in 10 minutes' time. And that's Avellina Balestri, American historian and author, who's going to be talking about the Brits during the American Revolution, which is her specialist subject. She should go on Mastermind on that fascinating subject, which we're very, very keen to know an awful lot more about. Good. Now, folks, I want to do on this day in British history, and we're concerned about what happened in the past, because it's what happened in the past which helps us to understand how we got to the situation today. And it also puts our situation today in a much wider context. It enables us to know basically where we came from, as it were. So we always have an on this day in British history, and it ranges widely from popular culture to history, to military history, to geography, to elements of the empire, elements of the Commonwealth, to politics, to whatever. And today is the day, the 11th of December in 1914, when the RAF Roundel was first unveiled. And you know what I mean when I say the RAF Roundel. We've got a pic here which we'll put up. It's the red, white, and blue circles that are inside each other, and it's become an iconic British design, just like the Union Jack. Whenever you see it, you immediately understand that's about Britain. Let's pull up a picture of that. Here we go. That's the RAF Roundel. That's actually on the side there of a Red Arrows aircraft. The iconic Roundel. And this is what the official order stated. The reason they put the roundels on the aircraft is because the soldiers were shooting at any of these strange flying objects that were going over them, not knowing friend from foe. And so it became very clear that the RAF, or the Royal Flying Corps, as it was known at the time, but we call it the RAF today, right? But it was the Royal Flying Corps back then. They realized that they needed to properly identify their aircraft in order to keep the aircraft safe. And so the directive read, all airplanes of the Royal Flying Corps to be marked on the underside and on the rudder with concentric circles, similar to those on the French machines, but with the colors reversed. That is, with a red circle inside a blue ring, the circles to be as large as possible. In addition, a Union Jack will be painted on the wingtips outside the circle. And those, that roundel actually became an element of popular culture when the mods adopted it as a fashion statement in the 1960s. And that went on really right through the 1970s and 1980s as well. And it really imprinted itself, as it were, into British popular culture. But it had its beginning, of course, with the Royal Flying Corps. Okay, so that's on this day in British history, the advent of another iconic British design, the RAF, or Royal Flying Corps, red, white, and blue roundel design. Fantastic. We so lucky, really, to live in a country with so many fantastic designs, iconic designs, such as this one behind me. The Lion Rampant. And indeed, it was very much popularized, that chap says there, by the Who rock group. They used it and still use it. I think if they're still touring, these guys. And of course, the Jam in the 80s really kind of re-popularized it for a whole new generation as well. Exciting times. Yes. So this is the Lion Rampant, which is another fantastic British flag. Good. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring, well, hang on. Here's another picture. There we go. That is available at our crowdfunder. Okay, that's designed by Dramatic Scotland Creations. It is beautifully varnished in that blue paint with all wood quality with a Union Jack. That's the RAF flag today with the roundel. That's available at our crowdfunder. That's one of our top rewards, and our crowdfunder will be going live just as soon as I press the button on that, which will be in 4 minutes time. And I got a message coming in here. Let's see what it says. Facebook is running again, but we're not broadcasting on it. Okay, let's see if we can get onto it. Let's click on this button. It's not going to happen, I'm afraid. I thought it would naturally work on Facebook, but it's not. That's a pity. Oh well. Facebook people, this will be shown on YouTube, and it will stay up on YouTube, and it will also stay up on our other platforms, which we're going to start pushing more of next year, which is our Bitchute channel, which is at bitchute.com/UK, a force for good. And this is a channel that we've had for 2 or 3 years now, but we haven't really exploited it at all. We've posted our regular 1 hour program on it, but we'd like to get more. We'd like to back up everything onto Bitchute. Most of our stuff actually now is backed up onto Bitchute, and we are intending to have all the stuff that appears on YouTube also going on to Bitchute. So if you're on bitchute.com, please do follow us. Search for UK A Force for Good or A Force for Good or any of these things. And next year as well, we would like to really develop our Rumble channel, which has only got 24 followers at the moment, but it's something that we want to get like hundreds of if we can. Rumble's a little bit harder because it's an American audience, but nevertheless, American audiences would be very interested in our next guest, who is Avellina. Folks, please do say hello to Avellina Balestri.
Hello, Alistair.
Hello, Avellina. Good to see you. Absolutely.
Yeah,
good.
Lovely to see you again.
Yeah. Well, we're so glad that you can make it onto our show.
We did so despite Facebook's nefarious attempts.
Yes. Who knows? Facebook doesn't normally go down like that. Mm-hmm. So who knows what was happening with the program tonight? Now, I might just mention to people on TikTok, you won't be able to see this because the interview is being conducted on YouTube. But if you go to youtube.com/UK A Force for Good, and you will be able to see us there. And also the question for those who want to enter the competition for our badges. The question is, the red, white and blue roundel represents which arm of the British forces? And send your answer to contact@aforceforgood.uk, and you could win these 2 wee badges that could be winging their way to you tomorrow. Looking very smart on your suit or something like that. And there's the roundel. We'll just keep the roundel in the back. I think it looks quite attractive, actually. Well, who would you like to speak about tonight? Because you're like the resident expert on British soldiers who fought in the, what would you call it, the American Revolution and the American British Indian Wars. Over there.
So the gentlemen I'll be discussing tonight, plural there of gentlemen, if I get round to it, we'll see how fast we can go, we'll see how much we can cover, but are going to be British officers who fought during the French and Indian War, also known as the 7 Years' War. So 7 Years' War is often the term used to describe the entire conflict, including what happened in Europe and what happened in North America, whereas French and Indian War is typically used just about the North American theater, and that's why here in America we typically say French and Indian War, whereas in Britain it is typically called 7 years, but they're both the same conflict. And first up, I would like to clarify, it's very common in the popular imagination for the French and Indian War, 7 Years' War, to be treated as a kind of prologue or prequel type of thing to the American Revolution. But I think it's important to remember that the people who were involved in this war did not obviously see it that way. This conflict had its own dynamics, it had its own integrity, etc. It was not contingent, upon the American Revolution, even though certain aspects of it did lead into what happened later. It still should be treated as its own war, and the people who fought in it obviously should be treated as heroes of their own war, and not always overshadowed by the American Revolution, I think. So to start off with, I'd like to begin with General Edward Braddock. And so there's a little bit of debate about whether Braddock was Scottish or English, because there's dispute about whether he was born in either Perthshire in Scotland or in London, England, and what his family background was exactly on each side of the family. But one thing we know about him certainly is that he was British. So I think it's safe to say he comes from a military background. And so therefore that could have been another reason he may have been born in Scotland while having an English ancestral background. And he has a very Anglo-Saxon name. Braddock means broad oak, and it fits his personality. He's a very stubborn, stalwart fellow. Everybody knew him for that. And that could be a good and a bad thing, in terms of him being both very brave, but also sometimes being a bit stuck in his ways and, just a bit stubborn. So he enters into the British military in his father's regiments at the tender age of 15, and he serves for more than 40 years in times of war and peace. He's a part of the War of Austrian Succession, and he rises through the ranks in various capacities. By the time he becomes quite famous in the French and Indian War, he is 60 years old. He's been through a lot. He's a long-term veteran, but he's being sent now to a region he's never been to before in North America, because troubles have started, territorial disputes with the French in North America. So, there's a story that's told, Braddock, he had a lady friend, a young actress, shall we say, and she ends up writing this sort of memoir someone after Braddock's death, when she did a little bit of a tell-all memoir, but some of the things she had to say were interesting. And one of those things was that she said that he told her he was very concerned about this expedition, and he sort of unfolded a map in front of her and it's like, look at this, they expect me to go out there into this practically uncharted area and sort of pave a path and take the war to the French and take down these French forts, and particularly Fort Duquesne. And he was feeling concerned about it, and according to her, he was telling her, I don't expect me to come back, Georgianne. And so it was a bit sad and a bit concerning, obviously, for him. So he wasn't super convinced that he was ready for this. But when he gets to North America, he puts on the sort of stalwart bravado he's famous for, and he's saying, okay, you know what, I'm gonna just act like I know what I'm doing here completely, and have confidence in the organization and the training of British arms, which was something of course he'd been in since his teens. So Braddock, his role is to go and take again Fort Duquesne from the French, and so he has to go on Braddock's March, is what it becomes known as, this advance through what is now, well, what was then as well Pennsylvania, but it was then a colony of Pennsylvania, British colony of Pennsylvania. And so he ends up with, as his aide, a young George Washington, who, of course, at this point is a loyal subject of the king and the mother country and all the rest of it, but has been having a bit of a hard time of it because of the debacle that occurred at Fort Necessity. And earlier than that, essentially a young Washington in charge of his Virginia militia opened fire on a French delegation party, kind of generating the war in some ways, or at least really, even though the war was brewing anyway, he really kind of set it into motion. He lost control of some of his Indian allies who ended up murdering the emissary from the French. And this started a whole bunch of stuff. Then he built a fort in a valley, Fort Necessity, which got taken down, and it was just a disaster. So he had been put on the bench, suffice to say. This is when he's in his 20s. It's, so he's out to the bench. He goes and volunteers himself to Braddock. He wants to get back in the show, back in the saddle again. And Braddock says, I like this kid. He's got spunk. He's a little bit annoying, but he's got spunk. And so he goes against even the royal governor in order to get Washington off the bench and take him onto his staff. And they have a very fascinating relationship. It's one of, in my opinion, a tough love paternalism. That Braddock basically becomes his mentor. He's tough on Washington, but the thing is, Braddock was a tough guy. Like, that was just the way he presented himself. It's just about everyone. Some people found him very cantankerous and rude and the rest of it, but if he cared about you, he really would be helpful to you, and he really would give you his knowledge and his veteran ability. He would try to pass that on to you, and that's what he did with Washington. He really took the kid under his wing and took him on. And
so you're talking about George Washington. You said George Washington there.
So Edward Braddock taking on a young George Washington under his wing and mentoring him. And so he gives him a sort of tough love. On the one hand, he kind of hollers at the kid a lot, but on the other hand, he really is trying to teach him, and he really is trying to hone something he sees in him. He sees some talent enough he sees spunk, he sees spark enough to, again, go up against opposition in order to get this kid on his staff and to really try to bring out what he believed was best and most useful in this kid.
It's just sorry to interrupt, but it's interesting, therefore, that this is the future founder of America, George Washington, if you want to call him that, at least the first official president, or at least the president that they date the number 47th from, even though there was presidents before George Washington that are unnumbered for some reason. But this is a George Washington basically being part of the British Army, getting his career started as fighting for the crown, basically.
Oh yes, very much so. I mean, I think everyone should remember that. I mean, if you read through the letters of George Washington at this age, this time, he isn't just a royalist. He's an uber royalist. He's a very, very gushy royalist. He's very eager to prove himself, to make connections, to mesh in with the British establishment. And he was dealing, it was a combination of things. Yes, there were prejudices against colonials that he was trying to kind of challenge and contest and try to get ahead, because he wanted, a commission in the regular British Army. But it was very, very hard for colonials to do that, because, again, prejudice against colonials. At the same time, he had to overcome his own issues. And this is the thing I would say about this part of the history. Washington sometimes made it a bit too much like it was only colonial prejudice, when in reality, Washington's early career was all over the place. And so at times when people were saying, well, no, you're not getting a promotion, it was because of things Washington himself did. So it wasn't solely the colonial thing, but it was an age of the class system. So you had prejudices, whether they, not just in terms of class, but in terms of location in the empire, in terms of religion. We've talked a lot about that with regards to my story, my trilogy, All Ye That Pass By, which deals with a Catholic trying to do things. So there was all form racial prejudice. It's just the way it was. As frankly, in different ways, we have in all eras of history. It's just part of human reality that prejudices come up and so forth. So that was the thing. But there were other elements. It wasn't solely prejudice. And I think sometimes when the story gets retold, we tell it solely from, I think, the way Washington saw things, and not always from a wider perspective. That yes, while he was dealing with certain prejudices, no question about that, he still did make his own errors, and some of the people around him were actually, and this is sort of part of this, what happens with Braddock. They actually were trying to help him. This was the case with Braddock. He was trying to mentor him. He was trying to be paternal toward him, really. You have these wonderful some of these wonderful little stories where in one case Washington gets really sick, and so he basically had a combination of like fever and dysentery, and it was just all kinds of nasty stuff you get on the trail. And so Braddock, in a kind of brusque fashion, is like, "Go to bed, kid. Go to bed. Seriously, like, don't spread the germs." But then he, essentially tries to get Washington to take his medicine, like just sleep. And Washington's like, "But I want to be where the action is. Please, I want to be where the action." And so he's like, "Look, all right. Look, if something really, really awesome happens, I'll get them and get you to bring you up." And so Washington, in just this is very little kid fashion in my mind, is sort of like, "Will you promise me on your word of honor?" And Braddock's just like, "Yes, I promise you on my word of honor. Now drink your medicine." And so, so they have this relationship. So fast forwarding to when everything goes to hell in a handbasket, we basically have the Battle of Monongahela, which is named after the river, the Monongahela River. And they get ambushed, and you do end up with a situation where Washington wants to be part of the action, even though he is sick and he's literally got like a pillow tied to his saddle. And Braddock is really annoyed with him and yelling at him, part like threatening to bayonet him, which I don't think he was gonna do, but he was yelling at him, and then telling other aides to like, "Look out for this sick pup, will you? He's just making a nuisance of himself, but okay." And so what ends up happening, they get attacked, and Washington ends up as one of the only aides, I think the only aide, in fact, of Braddock, mounted aide, like on horseback, who is not unhorsed, and who is not killed or wounded in this confrontation. It was very intense.
Who are they fighting in the Battle of
Monongahela? They're fighting the
That's a
French.
great word.
It is, isn't it? It's an awesome sounding battle, and I mean, it wasn't awesome for the people. It certainly wasn't awesome for the British and the British Americans, but it was eventful. It was eventful. So they're fighting the French and the Indians allied with the French. So it is a territory dispute that they're having with the French Empire, British Empire, French Empire, clash of empires that's happening here.
Can I just ask you, maybe, I don't know if you know this, but the Native American Indians there, I mean, what was in it for them? Were they trying to think that the French were going to be protecting their land, or why would the Indians choose sides in that case?
Well, they were like any other powers of the day. They made alliances. So some tribes would ally with the French, others would ally with the British, depending on what they believed was best for them, just like any other power, really. That's what they would be like. They would make those decisions based on who they thought would be a better ally, who would be better at helping them protect their lands or fight their enemies among the native tribes, access, trade. They were basically acting like every other, every other group of people in this situation. They were trying to do what they believed was best for them.
It's a good point, because I think when people tend to think of the Native Americans, we lump them all in together without realizing that, in fact, they were tribes who considered that they didn't necessarily want the other tribe coming in or taking their land, or that the other tribes had to be held at bay and things like that. There wasn't like this united all the Indians against the French, or all the Indians against the British. They had, as you just very well said there, they had their own regional tribal interests that they, as you say, thought best protected by a particular side or another.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, it's like thinking of the tribes that made up Europe. I mean, think of all the different peoples that make up Europe. Well, it's the same thing with North America. I mean, you've got a continent worth of people and tribe. They aren't all a single monolithic group. They all have, again, their unique interests and so forth. So yeah, you get, in this case, the French allied Indians are doing the main bulk of the attack. And this is the first time well, not the first time, that was a little strong, but this is a time where it's very prominent that you get to see Indian warfare, though, on organized troops. And so what ends up happening is that the colonial militias were more accustomed to dealing with this type of fighting. So they would know, like, hey, we can't hold formation, we're going to break and scatter and hide if you're being ambushed, that kind of thing. But Braddock, he is a man who cannot change on this point. And I mean, it's because he has been trained, hammered into him from a teenager. You break your position, you die. Everyone dies around you. It's not really a fault in his training, but it's a fault in the setting. So he's very used to European battlefield situations. And he was right about that. In European battlefield situations, you break your formation, you die. Things go wrong. And so he is absolutely stuck on this, and he won't listen to Washington, who is pleading with him to let the troops break their formation. But Braddock will not hear, he will not listen. And so he insists that this is the only way to survive. And he puts his body on the line with that belief, by the way. This man is no coward. He has multiple horses shot out from under him, keeps getting up. He stands, it rides, so to say, in the middle of the melee, and is constantly exhorting and forcing his men, both regulars and colonials, to stand and to fight. Washington as well is losing multiple horses, getting bullets shot through his coat, and all of this. And Braddock then gets mortally wounded with a bullet through the lung. And this is a famous painting of the wounding of General Braddock that's just come up on the screen. And so he then falls from his horse, and Washington and several others go over to try to help him. And he famously really lives up to his Broad Oak reputation here by shouting at them as they're trying to take him off the field, leave me here, give me my pistol and rounds of shot, and I fight them to the end. And so the logic seemed to be that he intended to stay and fight it out till he was dead. And so that it was just an awesome moment of just him being, again, I think the thing with Braddock is he's a wonderfully flawed hero, I think, which makes him interesting. He has these virtues and flaws that are quite mixed. Maybe one could even say all that is sort of best and worse in the traditional British character. And so that's something he wanted to fight to the end, to go down with his ship, so to speak. But his aides don't listen to him; they carry him off the field, and as he's kicking and screaming, essentially.
Did he survive that? Because we've only got 3 or 4 minutes left. But did he live to tell the tale?
He did not, sadly, because he had been mortally wounded in the lung. And so he ends up sending Washington. He says, okay, you go and you go, Washington, and you get help, And so then it takes him multiple days to die. Weirdly enough, he died on my birthday. I know this is a weird fact, but I always have this connection with him. He died on July 13th. I'm just like, birthday. So he lingered, or quite tragically, with this bullet in his lung, and he's extremely stressed. And one of the doctors said he may have died as much from the stress as from the bullet. And he was in such pain in the wagon that he kept it, and because he wanted to be seen by his men, he kept saying, get me back up on the horse, get me back up on the horse. And so they would get him up on the horse, and then he would go part-time, like on the horse and then back in the wagon, and on the horse, back in the wagon. And they finally, set him in the tent. And so he, I'm just going to try to wrap real quick.
Yes, go ahead. But there's something I want to
interject,
to
I
ask
just
you.
didn't want to fade away.
you have resuscitated this chap, Braddock, because you've written a 10-minute song about him.
I did, yeah.
Now it's on your YouTube channel.
Boy.
We'll just put up the YouTube address for you. But your 10-minute song is called Braddock's Sash.
Yes.
And in that picture, you can see that he was wearing a sash. We'll just bring that picture back up again. He's got a sash around him. That's just presumably just like a military sash or something like that.
It is from his father. And this is what this is actually the tie-in thing. So Braddock, when he's dying, right? So he sends a message to Georgianne, his lady friend, in which he's basically like, you know, tell her I died facing the enemy and all the rest of that. And then he leaves he calls his manservant over and speaks to him kindly and thanks him for his loyalty and then basically says to him, hey, you've seen enough of war, settle in America, do some farming, but go into service with Colonel Washington and serve him as well as you served me. And then Braddock goes on to will Washington that military sash that, you know, came from his father, given to him by his father upon his entry into his father's regiment. And so this was a very intimate and very paternal thing. Not only does he get that, but Braddock also gives Washington his pistols. He gives him a fancy pouch, like saddle pouch. So there's, and I think he also gets Braddock's surviving horse as well. So and Braddock asks Washington to do his eulogy. So this is all very intimate stuff going on with this, and Washington keeps these items, the sash and the pistols, throughout his life, and carries the sash around with him everywhere practically, even when he was a rebel general now at this point, and later on a president of said rebel breakaway entity. But unfortunately, Washington had some issues. I'm just going to go briefly. Washington had some issues in terms of, I feel like, not only forgiveness, but properly contextualizing father figures. This is something, and a lot of other things, but pops up later. He tends to be posthumously mad at Braddock. I'm not gonna go into great detail here, but suffice to say, he tends to talk up a bit of a game here about how much, you know, all of the flaws he saw in Braddock, to the point of annoying some of the other aides. And you had another aide who basically said, wrote Washington a letter in which he says, look, I don't know if you know this, but look, Braddock cared about you. I can't believe you didn't see this, but you were kind of his pet. I know he yelled at you a lot, but I mean, he did that when he liked you. That was his love language. You understand? He cared. He didn't really have a family. So, you know, come on, dude. Don't be like this. And he had a complicated relationship. I think it's interesting to comment on Washington in that light, that I feel like this was an aspect of his complicated relationship with Mother England. So it was like the parent type of thing was a bit complex for him, that he had this relationship though. And I think that was the point of the song, that I wrote the song. I made a point that even though he has this very complicated relationship, both with Braddock and with England, wider Britain, of course, though he has this complex relationship, he still he can run, but he can't hide. It's in his blood. It's in his DNA. It's in his very essence. It's in the language on his tongue. He can't escape from his Britishness. He can't escape from the fact that Braddock was this mentoring figure that got him off the bench, that it was his courage and his determination and his guts, just really, and ultimately his skill as well, because we forget, even when we think of, Washington gave him the advice to do irregular things, he was stuck on the regular thing. Well, the fact of the matter is, Washington needed to learn regularity and discipline too. So
well,
even though,
do you know what? I think we'll stop it there, because that's a perfect place to stop it. And basically what you have explained to us is that the founder of America, if you want to be dramatic about it, or at least modern, the 13
the modern
colonies.
Republican government, because we want to emphasize America has a longer history than that.
Exactly.
I always like to say that.
Exactly. The founder of the current Republican system got his start basically by this chap Braddock, who, if he had not taken this young whippersnapper in, who knows, the history of the world could actually have gone in a different direction. The history of America could have gone in a different direction. Who knows? So, in fact, Colonel Braddock General Braddock
get him up on
a huge influence over Washington, and a critical figure in America's past that I hitherto did not know anything about until just now. In fact, I said Colonel Braddock because
you were
Colonel
close, because
Braddock,
Colonel Washington you were thinking of, probably.
No, I wasn't thinking of him.
Oh.
I was thinking of Colonel James Braddock, which is the Chuck Norris character in the Missing in Action films.
Okay.
The
There we
three
go.
Missing in Action films, he's called Colonel James Braddock, because you said what a great name Braddock is. What a
It
great
is an
kind
awesome
of
name.
American British name. And well, obviously the script writers for Chuck Norris also thought the same thing. So
Yeah.
the whole thing goes right around, and we wouldn't have had a Chuck Norris if we hadn't had a George Washington, and we wouldn't have had a George Washington if we hadn't had a General Edward Braddock. And
the
I think
constellations go on.
Absolutely, we'll finish it on that fantastic note. If your book is All Ye That Pass By.
And he does get referenced in there. Braddock is referenced within the trilogy. Even though it focuses on the Revolution, it does have a lot of flashback stuff to the French and Indian War. So Braddock makes appearances.
Fantastic. Bringing the past into modern life. You can just search Amazon.com or Amazon.co.uk and you'll get that. Just search for All Ye That Pass By. I do say to people, listen to Avellina's song. It's a 10-minute song. You'll find it on her YouTube page, which is youtube.com/@Avellina Balestri. And for those of listening on the podcast, Avellina Balestri is AVELLINA Avellina, it's been an absolute pleasure. We'll clip this 25-minute section. We'll put it out onto the internet. Please do share it around, and let's get the history of British America better known.
A quick shout out to my friend George Bray, by the way. He's been a massive source of inspiration and research when it comes to the French and Indian War. He's a reenactor and living history, just researcher in general. He has been a wealth of information about all things French and Indian War and figures. I just want to do a shout out to him for being awesome, for being a great friend and helper.
He sounds like an awesome bloke. Great stuff, and more. We need more people like you and him to keep the British American story alive. Avellina, it's been a pleasure as always. We'll get you back.
Thank you so much. Merry Christmas to everyone on Force for Good, and
thank you. And keep
the Union Jack flying high.
Absolutely. Merry Christmas to you and your family over there in the great formerly British colony of Maryland.
British at heart. Thank you. God bless. You have a great day. Thank you.
Good night. Yeah, fantastic. Avellina is always a very enthusiastic and very inspirational and educated historian. Now, did we have a winner of our competition? We asked the question. The question was, on this day, the Roundel, the red, white and blue Roundel, represents which arm of the British forces? It was launched on this day back in 1914, becoming a British icon. The answer was the Royal Air Force, or if you said Royal Flying Corps, that also counted. And the winner was Nicola Black. So Nicola, well done. We'll get your 2 little badges that you can wear with pride to you. And we'll send them away tomorrow. Send us your address via the email, and we'll get them sent straight to you. Now, folks, you will have seen running along the bottom there our crowdfunder. Our crowdfunder is now live at crowdfunder.co.uk/AFFG 2025. Now, it's going to run for 28 days, so it will be ending at 7:30 on our program on Wednesday, the 8th of January. And this is the time, the Christmas time, that we ask those of you who have benefited in some way from our work in the previous year to please make a small donation or a large donation. No donation is too large or too small, and it will allow us to continue to keep the British end up through 2025. We're not asking for a huge amount of money as far as politics is normally concerned. We spoke there about the people who were complaining that the Scottish government had only given them 100,000 when they wanted 5 million. Okay, so we're not as ungrateful as these sorts of people. We're very grateful for whatever pennies that you can offer. And goodness me, you know that we do deliver. You've seen us delivering this year, not just every single day across all our social media platforms, but also live in public, often in very exciting situations, shall we say. And we look forward to throwing ourselves into the struggle for the Union and for Britain next year as well, along with all our great team that we totally rely upon here, our team that's been with us for many years, and all our supporters, those who support in whatever way they can, whether that's sharing our internet material, whether it is coming out on the streets with us, especially our very valued table team, and who come out at our events as well. Goodness me, we intend to keep this show on the road, and we intend to keep doing this. I'm in this for the long term. I'm not going to stop doing this. Our team's not going to stop doing this. And you can be assured that your money, whatever it may be, will be extremely well spent. So we do indeed, sir. We do indeed take the fight to the yesers. So please do, if you can, go to crowdfunder.co.uk/AFFG 2025. Now that's the QR code. We'll just get rid of the thing along the bottom. There you go. That's the QR code, which you can scan, and we'll just keep that up for a few seconds there so that it is properly recorded. You can scan that and you'll be taken to crowdfunder.co.uk/AFFG 2025. Okay. And we're calling it Help the Union Thrive in 2025. And with your help, that's exactly what we're going to do. Folks, we will be back next week. It's been a pleasure speaking with you all. Thank you to all the comments. Sorry it didn't work on Facebook, but that was Facebook's issue there. Catherine says, thanks, Avellina. Fascinating. Merry Christmas. Debbie says, congrats to Nicola Black for winning the badges. Varheit 365 says, excellent. Have a great British Christmas. Catherine says, congrats, Nicola. And does Derek also. Great stuff, folks. We'll be back next Wednesday, the 18th. It just remains for me to say, God bless the United Kingdom and God save the King. See you next week.